So I'm here to talk to you guys about marketplaces and getting them started. Marketplaces, as you guys probably know, are an awesome internet business model. The internet's all about connecting people. Marketplaces are about connecting people. But getting them started has this fundamental problem of chickens and eggs. Which one do you do first? Why would anyone buy anything if there's nothing to sell? Why would anyone sell anything if there's nothing to buy? So I thought I'd walk you through a little bit about my company, Envato, at the very beginning. So my name's Collis. I work at Envato. I'm a co-founder and CEO of the company. And we run a few different products. We're a platform for creativity. We run Envato Market, where you can buy all sorts of stuff for your creative project, WordPress themes, photos, music, video, everything you could need. Envato Studio, you can hire a freelancer to work on your project, and Tuts Plus, you can learn to do it yourself. Bit of an overall ecosystem, but Envato Market is the one that I want to focus on. It was the one that we started off with, and it's the biggest by far part of our company. So Envato today, 250 staff, 35,000 people selling on our marketplaces. There's 1.5 million active buyers, so people who have bought something in the last 12 months or so. And those sellers have earned $200 million all-time earnings over these 8 years. And to this day, we are still completely 100% bootstrapped. Oh. But back in 2006, it looked a little different. It was like 30 grand of savings we had. I'd also just gotten married. 3 designer founders, so I was a web designer. Had a bit of experience selling Flash. I used to sell Flash on another marketplace called iStockPhoto. And we decided to get started with our own marketplace. Now, stock photos was the big game in town, so iStockPhoto was already going from, like, I think 2003, and it had changed the stock photo, stock image world by introducing this concept of microstock crowdsourcing. You know, people were getting their DSLRs for the first time and getting involved in amateur and professional photography online. It kind of reshaped the business. And imagery is a very big business. It's something like $6 billion a year around the world. iStockPhoto quickly took off with this business model. Getty was the sort of granddaddy of this space. And Shutterstock launched shortly later. Today, Shutterstock is a listed company, also quite substantial, whereas iStock was the first microstock stock photography company. Shutterstock came in as the first subscription microstock stock photography company. After that, there was a number 3 and 4 already by the time we launched, and since then, there's like 20. So it's really exploded this area. And it's a very big market, but it was already in a bit of a market lockup, I would call it. So the cool thing about marketplaces is that once you get them going, if you can get them going, they tend to build up a lot of momentum. Once there's a lot of buyers on that marketplace, lots more sellers want to be there. Once more sellers are there, more buyers want to go there. And they gather all this momentum and become very hard to disrupt. And stock photos was a bit like that. Now, in my opinion, to challenge a locked-up market like that, you need to find some sort of angle, differentiate, and then attack. So in the case of iStockPhoto, there was already a big stock photo market going. iStock came in with the idea of microstock, doing things cheaper, lowering the barriers for entry, and they quickly gathered steam. Shutterstock came along, and they took a twist of subscription purchasing, and that was their angle. For us, we were like, oh, this is already a pretty flooded market, don't know what the angle is. So we went with something we knew, which was Flash, because I used to be a web designer. I was making little Flash things. Some of you may remember Flash. Used to be a big deal. Totally not anymore. But back then it was kind of cool, and we decided to build a stock Flash marketplace. So it was a place where you'd buy preloaders and site templates and all kinds of annoying banner ads. And yes, we are to blame for some of that. But we still needed to get it started, right? So we still needed to kickstart this thing. And the key problem, as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, is why buy when there's nobody selling? Why sell when there's no one buying? And you kind of need to choose one of these two to get started, right? We chose the why buy when there's nobody selling. That seems like the easier one. I think it's the more common one to go for, and it's all about inventory. So for us, we commissioned content. We hired people to make Flash to sell on this Flash marketplace. We paid people who already had Flash to list their stuff. And I used to make my own stuff, so I would make things and put them on there as well. There's lots of other techniques, and of course, marketplaces. There's a wide range, everything from Airbnb and Uber through to the granddaddy of marketplaces, eBay. So you just have to kind of think about how you want to get the thing that you're trying to sell on this marketplace started. Obviously, it's not always content, but in our case, I've observed from other marketplaces in our space, there are a lot of other techniques people use. We have a lot of non-exclusive sort of content owners, people who list their stuff on many marketplaces. That's one way you can get content in. You can incentivize, it's probably the most common thing to do, sign-up bonuses, special rates, competitions, giveaways, that kind of thing. Scraping other sites or plugging into APIs. So Craigslist, very famously, is constantly thwarting people who are trying to use its listings. Obviously, retail may not. Thwarted Google as well as people trying to use its listings. And that's a very common way to get content into your marketplace. So from February 2006 to August 2006, we built this site. We seeded the library with inventory that we had found, made, commissioned, and we basically spent everything we had. We blew through our $30,000. We spent credit card debts. I ended up living in my in-laws' basement with my wife happily, but nonetheless, it was still a basement, still kind of not great. And around August 2006, we managed to get the site alive. And on day one, we had about 100 things, which doesn't actually sound very many, but it was enough. There was 100 things for sale. So next problem, buyers. We had something to sell, not a lot, but we had something. We needed someone to buy it. So we're selling Flash, remember? So who uses Flash? Well, Flash designers, Flash developers, and we kind of sat down and went, well, where do these guys hang out? And because it was something that I already did, I kind of was pretty familiar, and certainly I highly recommend if you're starting a business to do it in a space that you kind of understand. It makes a lot of things a lot easier. So for us, we were like, okay, well, they probably hang out on sites about Flash. Design galleries are very popular. If you're a Flash designer, web designer, you'd probably hang out at some sort of showcase site, and of course, forums. So we got in front of them. We built a site, which I'll show you in a second, which got featured for its design. You'll all probably look at it and go, but remember, this is back in 2006 when things generally looked a bit lamer. And so this design managed to get into galleries nonetheless. We bought lots of cheap ad spots because we were doing it in very niche targeted areas. We could afford advertising even though we had a pittance of a budget. And we went onto forums, and there used to be a lot of sites where you could sort of broadcast news. These days, I guess it's all social media. Either way, we used whatever we could find. So on launch day, we had 300 visits, and we had one sale for $10, and I was so disappointed. I was like, I've been working on this for 6 months, and you kind of get into this trap where you're like, everyone's been working on it for 6 months, but no, they haven't. You've been working on it for 6 months. They've just seen it. Actually, now I look back and I'm like, it's amazing we made money on day one. Yeah, it was only $10, but that's still kind of cool. This is the site which we launched. It's actually a couple months in, but it was Flash, audio, video, and pixel fonts, though that was a bit of a lame addition in retrospect. So after we'd got it live, into a couple of galleries, we just started hustling. So the first thing was traffic, because we had a bit of content, and as soon as we started getting a bit of traffic, we started hustling for content again, going on forums, hitting up Flash designers, going, hey, did you know you could make money selling that stuff that you weren't using? And as soon as we had more content, we went back to traffic, just sort of alternating constantly. We made the site quite sticky. We used forums. We built up a little community. At first, there was nobody there. I would just talk to myself and my co-founders, made multiple usernames so that it would look like we were talking to other people. There's one thread where there's a guy who thinks he's talking to 10 people, but it's just me. We have a value at Envato, which is tell it like it is. I don't know that that was our most tell it like it is moment, but hey, it got things started. I'm sure he felt pretty special, Butters, wherever you are. Lots of engagement, gamification. We made it a bit of a memorable site. The logo had a foxtail. And we tried for this sort of self-reinforcing loop, which I think you'll find is present in most marketplaces. So we were trying to get lots of content. And one of the reasons was that every time we had some new item for sale with some bizarre specific title, Flash CS2 preloader with a spinner, we had one more chance of appearing in a search result for that specific title, and because it was being made by all these different users around the world, they were all little optimizers and optimizing their titles for traffic. So the more content we had, the more SEO traffic we were getting, the more traffic we were getting, the more likely we had buyers who would then go back and get more content being produced. Here's a graph of sales in the first 10 weeks. You can see that first week we did actually make it at $80, and within 10 weeks we had doubled. I mean, it was still $160, but 2x in 10 weeks. It was kind of cool, but it wasn't like a massive growth trajectory. It's not like, we weren't printing money, $160 a week. There was 3 co-founders, and we'd hired a developer. This isn't exactly enough to pay for all of us. So we were still, for the first 18 months, we continued freelancing in order to, have money to live. Week 10, we'd gotten, though, up to 300 files, so we had now tripled our library because there were some sales and some Flash designers out there who were like, hey, that's kind of cool. I'll go put my stuff there. We even started getting a couple of music makers and people doing sound effects. One of my co-founders, we wanted more sound effects. I bought him a little recording device, and he just went around recording everything from toilet flushes to buses, and that was one of the ways we grew that library in that time too. But anyhow, so October came. It's like 10 weeks in. Launch is starting to wear off. The fact that we've launched, not really a news story, not really a campaign anymore. So we needed something else, something to push things forward. And we came up with this idea, which we called the Showroom, because we were like, stock, it's got a bit of a cheap image. It's like stuff that someone else made. And we're like, we need to show how awesome it could be. And we also wanted a vehicle to get free credits out. So the way that our sites worked were you would buy credits, and then you would use those credits to buy all the stuff on the marketplace. And we're like, maybe if we gave out lots of free credits. So we came up with this idea of a credit giveaway in order to stimulate sales. So we figured the more you, as an author, because I used to be a person selling, I remembered this. When you're selling stuff, the moment you get your first sale, you're like, whoa, cool, someone's interested in my stuff. It kind of makes you want to make more stuff. So we were like, maybe we should give out credits, and then people will buy, they get a taste, but also the authors get a taste of sales, they'll get excited, and we needed a vehicle to get this credit giveaway out there. We came up with this idea of the showroom. So this was going to be a way to draw attention, show quality, sell people on the sorts of things you could make with stock. This is a picture of the showroom. There was actually 3 showrooms, and each one just had little flash things that had interactivity or functionality, and it was just a neat way of showing people how the whole thing could work. And it was all backed up with this 10,000 free credits giveaway. Now, this didn't actually cost us very much, because when we launched the site, we actually only used to pay 25% of every sale. So although we gave out $10,000, only $2,500 was actually going to make it to a seller. And on top of that, lots of people didn't actually get around to spending their credits. I made the showroom myself, so that didn't cost us much. And in total, we spent $1,500. You can see it had quite an effect. We were going along there in August, September, October, those first 10 weeks at a certain trajectory. We did our little giveaway, and our sales shot right up. Now, of course, we were giving away credits, so some of this is just free stuff that we'd given away. We had a bit of a New Year dip, but importantly, when we came back out the other side, we had a much, much stronger curve this time. It had gotten a lot more momentum. By month 9, we'd now grown to 1,000 files, and it really escalated, because now all of a sudden there was genuine sales, and as far as the sellers were concerned, they couldn't really tell the difference between free credits and real credits, so they just started making more stuff because it was kind of exciting. Some of them even made a lot of stuff in that promo period particularly, so they could try to mop up some of the free money we were giving away. And it really got things cranking. Here's a longer graph, and you can see it really just started taking off, and that continued on for some years. This is a graph of visitors and search visitors. I mentioned before there was this self-reinforcing loop, and you can see that in the first 3 months we actually had barely any search traffic, but after the showroom we started to have enough content that we were starting to pick up some search traffic, and of course the gap between number of visitors and number of search visitors is the number of visitors from everything else, and you'll see it's actually quite consistent. Our growth, especially in those early years, was off the back of search. when I look back, I feel like we had a little fire going, we had a bit of momentum going, which is, I think, the most important thing in the marketplace is to have something, a little bit of fire. You've got some sellers selling, a few buyers buying, and then we just poured some gasoline on it with free credits, with a campaign that got our showroom out in front of lots of people. We submitted to all these design galleries. They featured it because it looked kind of cool, and that really, really brought on much faster growth. Eventually, we leveraged FlashSet into 8 markets, including websites, video, music, graphics, and most recently, we finally started hitting into the stock photo world. So I had 3 lessons to share with you before I wrap up. Lesson number 1, when I look back in a locked-up market, I think the best thing to do is to differentiate and build up a beachhead. So for us, that was Flash. We got into Flash, and we used that to build up an audience. And by the time the next opportunity came along, which was making a full music marketplace, we already had some buyers, we already had some sellers, we had some reputation, and we leveraged that into audio. A little while later, we noticed that WordPress themes, people seemed to pay for WordPress themes, so we built a WordPress theme marketplace, and that just took off. And each time we used the beachhead to get into a little bit further, which was good because it turns out Flash kind of sucks and went completely downhill. So best move ever was not sticking in Flash. Lesson number 2, I think you pick the easier side of the market and then you alternate constantly. Usually that's the inventory side. As soon as you've got something going, though, you need to flip. You can't just focus on one side and expect the other one to come. You need to constantly alternate between them. Usually, as I say, content and listings comes first because that's the easier thing. There's people more likely to want to sell stuff than to buy stuff when there's nothing there. But you can build an audience first. We've done it once. I decided, I was like, we should build a Mac app store. Nobody's done that. This was before Apple made a Mac app store. That was kind of the end of that business idea. But in the meantime, I was like, first, though, we need an audience. So we launched this app review network called AppStorm, and we started reviewing apps and talking about apps and rounding them up, and it got really popular, like 3 million visits a month. And our aim was like, once that was built up, then we would build the marketplace with stuff to sell. Meantime, Apple came along, and once again, it was Steve Jobs who killed Flash, then the App Store. I think he had it in for me. Anyways, you can build an audience first. I don't really recommend it, though. It's a little bit trickier than, I think, getting inventory in first. And then lesson number 3 is that it's a good idea to artificially stimulate the market. I don't think in starting a marketplace, unless the need out there is just burning, I think you need to, in medical shows, they have those metal things, those things, that's what you need for your market. Later on, we didn't just do that credit giveaway. I used to literally buy files when they would come in. I used to review people's work, and I would go and fix it up for them so that it would be nicer to sell. I think you have to kind of manually intervene until your marketplace has some momentum. So that's my 3 lessons. That's all I thought I'd go through today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Collis. Hi, everyone. Shall we go to the bar?
Yes, sir.
So I'm Rick Baker. I'm one of the co-founders of Blackbird Ventures, and very happy to be here today. So a quick plug for Slido. I'm going to put the URL. So if anyone doesn't have the URL, please ask questions using the URL. Quick plug for our live streaming as well. Please tweet that out. We want to get lots of people live streaming. So, questions?
Yes.
I thought we'd start with product market fit. So clearly you guys got product market fit, and it was that really, that second graph where it really sloped up strongly that was clear that you had it then. But talk a little bit about your thinking in day 1, $10 kind of, is that product market fit?
Yeah.
Week 10, how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for us, I think I mentioned I used to sell Flash on another marketplace. So I think when I look back, and it wasn't by any stretch of the imagination pre-planning or anything, but when I look back, I'm like, well, I used to already sell Flash, so we knew a market existed. We knew that people bought Flash, and because I was a Flash seller and I knew that there was nowhere else really to sell Flash except a photo site who persistently called you a photographer, even though I was like, I'm not a photographer. I knew there was a market, there was no one else serving that market, and I'd observed the business model of a marketplace. So I think looking back, even from day 1, we knew there was some level of product market fit was going to be present, and sure enough, it took off. Certainly, I think it's pretty key to understand that, like everything I just talked about with alternating between sides and how you get a marketplace started, if nobody wants to sell or buy, that's not going to work. If the market is completely locked up, if tomorrow you decided to build Airbnb number 2, it's probably not going to make it, no matter how good you are at that sort of marketing. I do think that market fit is probably the most essential differentiator between success and failure.
Yeah. So, we often say to many founders we see that, I believe that you can build the tech. I can believe you can build the product. What I'm worried about is will people buy that product?
Yes.
Yeah. So did you build any products and get them out there that didn't get product market fit? Or did you have 100% strike rate?
Oh, no. I don't think anybody has 100%. Yeah, I built all kinds of weird-ass products that we killed off. There was like links guy. I made this wiki one time. I was like, wikis, they're really big. Let's build a wiki about Photoshop. And it just became this spam-infested site. AppStorm, obviously, I was like, we'll make a marketplace to generate revenue without a marketplace. Ultimately, it was 3 years of losses. We'd gotten a little bit bigger so we could sustain it. Yeah, I think I don't think there's a formula for product market fit. I don't think there's like a silver bullet. And I think to some extent we lucked out on that first one. Like there was a bit of intelligence to it, but also there was a lot of luck.
Yeah. So let's go on to two-sided markets. And again, I think people often don't understand the difficulty of sort of firing both sides of the market. Did you go into this understanding that? Not rationally. Bevan mentioned that naivety was big on his list. I certainly remember, I wrote a business plan, so I wanted to start this marketplace, and I was like, okay, first thing to do, I went to a bookstore back when those were still around, and I bought a book about business planning. It was like, whatever, Business Planning 101, and then I followed it through, and I wrote this business plan that was completely useless. We'd never ever used it. Did you ever look at it?
No, I never looked at it. And I got stuck on the financial bit. I didn't really understand that. But anyways, I did write out a sort of rough, we'll start at Flash, and then we'll get into this market and that market. And my dad, who used to be a CEO of a tech company years ago in Papua New Guinea, where I grew up, I remember showing him this business plan very proudly, and he was like, it's very good you are very naive, because this will take a long time. This is way harder. And I think that's important, not totally understanding just how much pain you're in for. But if you knew everything, maybe you wouldn't do it.
Yeah. So you talked a lot about some of the things that really worked in terms of seeding both sides of the market, but I assume you tried lots and lots and lots of things. Could you talk a little bit about that process of, was it a lot of thinking, building, a campaign and then doing it? Or was it really sort of much more sort of day-to-day, well, try one thing, try something, fail, start, try again?
Yeah, totally. So for us, we obviously were capital constrained. We didn't have a lot of money, and therefore we needed to do things much more creatively. We had this constraint of don't have anything to spend, and that meant we had to innovate in order to get in front of people, so coming up with ideas like, hey, let's build a showroom. The trouble, of course, with innovating is, again, most of the time it fails. There was plenty of campaigns that were like, what a lame campaign. I spent like 3 weeks making this wallpaper competition that went absolutely nowhere, but then others would work. We tried everything. I'm a big believer in when it comes to marketing, that it's very important to figure out what's going to suit that particular product, that particular audience, try lots of different things, see which things work. Analytics tools these days have gotten really good, so you can track most things and then optimize. So we did everything from going on forums to what is today content marketing, through to competitions, advertising, different forms of advertising, email, RSS, banners, SEM, whatever we could afford. Stumble upon advertising, which used to be a thing. Started blogs to get onto social media. Dig, which Bevan showed, used to be really cool. Some of you may not remember it, but that was a lot of traffic. That one that Bevan showed was like would have annihilated most sites back then. Yeah, we would try everything, and we would measure everything just in visitors and what sort of conversion we were getting. And one thing that I always think is that it wasn't always the big campaigns necessarily that were the only thing that mattered. Because we have this really active community, people chat on the forums all the time. Sometimes they have these threads about how did you hear about Envato, and often I would see some campaign that I thought was a total flame out, and there'd be like a guy who became an author who sold thousands of dollars who were like, yeah, I made this wallpaper. That's how I ended up here. I'm like, oh, those 3 weeks wasn't a total whitewash.
Yeah, awesome. So you mentioned metrics. I just want to touch on that. Did you have a lot of metrics at the beginning, or did that grow in? Did you sort of grow into the metrics thing, or was it?
Definitely grew in over time. I mean, early on, obviously analytics we used a lot, and that was quite novel back then, that you could use Google's analytics package instead of Urchin and those other ones that were around. And revenue, looked a lot at revenue in different categories. And when it was small, it was little enough you could literally see the effects of things by watching stuff. To this day, I look at a lot of sales metrics daily. But I'm a big believer also in intuition. I don't think you should go too far down the data end. I don't think you should go no data either. I think there's a happy medium. The less you know about a market, the more data is important because you're new. And intuition, I firmly believe, comes from having internalized a lot of experiences and data, and then you can start to make those faster decisions. But yeah, we would balance the both.
So in a marketplace, what do you reckon are the two most important metrics that someone who's building a marketplace should be focusing on?
Yeah, look, it probably depends a bit on different marketplaces. For us, because we were a category-driven one, we looked a lot at revenue for different categories. So we were constantly looking for the thing that was going to take off. And in each of our marketplaces, there's been some kind of content or some kind of person who's made stuff that just nobody else had really done. So in Flash, our Flash marketplace was going along pretty well with all the stuff that we had imagined when we started the marketplace. So we're like, yeah, there'll be preloaders and there'll be menus. And then some guy out of Eastern Europe was like, XML site templates. And he made this XML site template, and for whatever reason, this was like crack to Flash designers. They just started buying this thing. And the great thing about Marketplace Dynamics is that a whole bunch of other sellers were like, cool, let's make XML site templates. Next thing you know, we had this massive category of site templates. And we watched sales and categories very closely, because as soon as something like that would happen, as soon as we saw something that looked like a breakout, we would then push it hard. So in sort of marketing campaigns, but also out to other sellers, kind of trying to tell them, hey, did you notice this thing is like really awesome to sell? Stop making that crappy stuff and make one of these. And that would help a lot. It's probably quite different in other kinds of marketplaces.
Yeah. So just before, the last thing I want to ask you before we get on to audience questions.
Yeah, shoot.
See one up there that I'm going to enjoy asking you, is about financing and funding.
Yeah.
Obviously, as a venture capitalist, we think there's a lot of value that comes from capital at the right time, but as well as capital, really helpful capital.
Yeah.
You guys have done it yourselves. You've had this, awesome, cash flow generative business that allowed you to do that.
Yes.
How are you thinking about that now? You're obviously really happy you're able to do that. Any thoughts around funding and advice, I guess, for people who are starting out?
Yeah, sure. So like, I'd like to pretend like not taking funding was some kind of artful decision. It's just like, whoa, there's people who give you money? Why didn't someone email me that? No, at that time, I just thought we had to use our own savings. That just seemed like, you're supposed to put your money in and then come up with a business where you sell stuff so that you can get more money and then put that money back in. And in hindsight, I look back and think if we had had capital, maybe I would have spent it stupidly. Yeah. I wasn't like the brightest guy when we started, so I'm not sure it would have helped us in that sense, although a little later on it might have helped. Yeah. I think what would have been more useful actually is the advice component. So there's lots of pitfalls in running a business, especially the less experience you have. So I'd never worked anywhere with more than like 5 staff, so everything was new, like learning about everything from performance reviews to how you're supposed to hold currency was like, oh, never heard of it. Yeah. And having advisory, I think looking back would have been helpful. I leaned on my dad, that helped, and I would try to read or, intake information from wherever. But for me, I think that's probably the more helpful side in my mind.
And I imagine now there's quite a few US VCs calling you up. Do you get the odd call
Oh, yes.
from those guys?
Yeah, I have a fair few. I've managed to make my dad in charge of talking to them, so I just...
Excellent. Ship them off. Right, let's go to top questions. Oh, good. There's the top one is why, well, we've just done that. Why are you still bootstrapped? We've done that. Is there an exit strategy?
No, I remember getting asked that on day one. What's your exit strategy? Our lawyers were like, "What's your exit strategy?" And I was like, "I don't know. We just started the thing. I mean, come on. For all I know, it's going to go nowhere." It didn't go nowhere.
We really don't like it when we see in a pitch deck, you know, the last slide is exit. You know, we're going to be bought by these 4 companies in 2.5 years.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's how... I used to always have this idea that when I was starting out that there was a proper business way to do things. And maybe there still is in this secret book somewhere. But I've come to the general conclusion that you kind of find your own path through things.
Okay, next one. Do you have any WFIO, where effed it's over moments, and what were they?
Yeah, I don't think you can get through business without having one of those. So our first product was called Flash Den. We sold Flash. It had actually going to be called Flash Fox. We had this lawyer who was like, "No, don't put Fox in there. They're really litigious." I don't know why he didn't mention that selling Flash, which was a trademark of another company, and calling your product Flash something wasn't a very good idea. Sure enough, not that he was a pretty good lawyer generally, if he's out there. This one error. Anyhow, 2 years in, I think it was okay. We didn't try to register any trademarks, and I think it was just going all quiet until one day we got it in our head to register the trademark FlashDen, and we got this thick tome of legal text from Adobe where my children belong to them. I didn't have them yet even, but so we changed the name to ActiveDen. I think that was, but now, over the years we've had more and more little legal issues from different corners, and they seem a lot less scary. We have a legal team. At that time, there was...
You were it, right?
Yes, it was like, what is this? What does this mean? This is the end. I remember deeply contemplating how, because the terms were all like, "Oh, you will hand us everything." And it's like, this is it. I can't believe it. What a stupid mistake, rookie mistake. We shouldn't have put their name in. Now the business is toast. I think over time you get a bit more like, okay, well, this is like cause, and once again, if we'd had maybe more advisory, might have seemed less intimidating.
Yeah. How did you come up with the name Envato?
We bought it from a site called Brand Bucket. So after the FlashDen trademark debacle, and we'd started more marketplaces, Audio Jungle, Theme Forest, and we needed an umbrella name. Came up with the name Eden because they were all had animals. It didn't really make a lot of sense. Tried to register that. Turns out there's 1 million Edens out there, and so we ended up on the site Brand Bucket. Bought it for I think like $1,000. And we had a little case study on their site.
Yeah, cool. Okay, next one. How did you make the decision to focus on new markets versus new products? And I guess that's new markets globally, or new products, for your marketplace. Particularly if both have ROI. Is it regional? Is it product based? I think that's what the question's getting at. And also maybe you could add in a little bit about sort of this idea of global day one, and were you guys thinking your marketplace was global?
Yes.
From the get-go.
Definitely. From day one, we saw ourselves as global. I remember distinctly once going to hire a marketer who was like, the first thing we need to do is hit up Australia. And I was like, Australia is like 4% of our market. Yeah. Why would we spend time on Australia? If you double it, it makes no difference. This is at a time when the whole thing was doubling every year. We always looked at it as a global market. I think that's one of the beauties of the internet is that you can go for global markets. Although, the local things are also pretty successful on the web. No, I think in terms of new products...
if you had multiple ones to choose from, how was it? Was that instinct, gut feel?
Yeah, and also I'm just a person who likes to make new things. I love startups because it's about making stuff and making new things, and so arguably we have made too many products in our time. We've started consolidating them, so now that list looks like 3 things, and we close a few down and whatnot, but actually we would get into a lot of things. Some of the team harass me at work for not having focus. Look, a butterfly. The reality is, though, like some of it was planned. As I say, on day one, we did have this idea that Flash wasn't the end game, and that we needed to leverage Flash into the next market until we had a one-stop shop. That was always our sort of overall plan, is we would be the site where you could buy every creative asset. It's just that along the way I started blogs and teaching things and job boards and all kinds of stuff. I don't know if that was like super bright, but it was a good learning experience, and often we would build up traffic networks which would come back in as well.
Great. What are the books that influenced you most?
So I love reading. I've never had a single book which has completely stood out. I love blogs and online reading. I visit Hacker News basically every single day. I think Bevan mentioned The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which I've just gotten. I love
Awesome.
the blog of Ben Horowitz. Yeah. That's a great blog to read up on. But yeah, all kinds of stuff. Given I didn't know anything about running a business, I would just read whatever, books about franchising, books about HR, management, leadership. Usually there'd be something I'd take out of there, agile, whatever.
It is amazing now how open the whole startup ecosystem is, particularly the Silicon Valley ecosystem, which used to be a closed club. When you started, right? You would have known there would have been very little information coming out of Silicon Valley about all that stuff, and now there's just a
yes.
waterfall of it every day, which is, I think, amazing.
And a lot of insights. There's a company called Buffer that publishes like literally everything about their business. They've got a dashboard. You can see their churn, you can see their HR policies, their salaries. Yeah. It's quite bizarre. Yeah. But yeah, really cool. Cool, but bizarre, let's face it.
You're not going to go that far? I don't think so. I think we've done the bootstrapped question. So what drove you to be bootstrapped? Okay. Love to know more about your personal background, your connection to Australia, where you've lived your life. And I'm going to add to that why you've stayed in Australia. Were there any sort of pulls towards, US in particular, but other regions? Yeah, sure. So I'm half Iranian, half English, a bit of a mixed up bag, and I grew up in Papua New Guinea. My accent is a mess, obviously, so don't read too much into my accents. We had an international school with teachers from all over the place. Then I moved to Australia, though I often think I'm the lamest Australian there is. I really am a bit of a disappointment to our foreign staff when they come visiting, though I do like meat pies a lot, which is not a thing anyone else in the world seems to eat. Personal background. So I studied math and computer science at UNSW here in Sydney, and then later my roommate was a web designer. He had like a bootleg copy of Photoshop that I took, and I learned web design and paid Adobe back by making big Adobe marketplaces and taking their Flash name. Buying many copies of Photoshop since, many copies. Don't worry, Adobe. Should we put a plug for Canva in now? Have you seen Canva?
Yes, they're super cool.
We might need a Canva marketplace.
Yes.
I think they're building their own.
They've got one their own.
You guys can help them with that.
So I became a bit of a web designer. I was kind of into the internet during that .com period, and by the time 2006 rolled out, when we started our marketplace, I was like, man, the internet's over. .com was the time to do stuff, but we decided to do something anyways. And luckily, because I was a web designer, I had a particular skill set which helped with starting the company. But generally speaking, because we bootstrapped, I would think of myself as a generalist, happy to do all kinds of stuff, good at many things, not very good at anything. And I think that's really good for bootstrapping. You kind of need to fit into many roles.
Yeah. Okay. Can you please share with the audience how massive Envato is right now? I think that's a good question because lots of people, don't know that it's an awesome, how awesome it is, and lots of people also, I think, don't quite know how Aussie it is too.
Yeah, cool. This is a leading question.
How many
one of my staff is out there? So look, it's
how many sort of transactions per day? How many, all sorts of things.
So we sell something every 6 seconds. We sell 1 million WordPress themes a year. when you think about the Alexa top 1,000,000, sites outside of that are usually pretty minuscule. So 1,000,000 sites a year is quite a lot. Many of sites.
What percentage of WordPress sites do you reckon?
I suspect a lot.
Have a theme bought by you
Yeah,
guys?
there's a lot of times I come across one where I'm like, oh yeah, that's Envato, or oh, that's the X theme.
Did you see our one up there for,
Nice.
for $13 for the sunrise, and
Excellent.
we splurged out with our Blackbird Ventures one. We went to $42.
Cool.
We had a premium one.
Nice. We also the largest stock music marketplace by volume, so we've licensed a million tracks every year. But it's all it's a little bit industry-ish, so a lot of our users are web designers, freelancers, and one of our challenges as a company is to slowly broaden out into a broader and broader market.
Yeah. So we've got time for a couple more. You started by describing the market as crowded and with big names. And how did you view these incumbents? Did you monitor them? Did you stay away from their strengths, or how did you stay away? How did you carve your beachhead?
Yeah, sure. So iStockPhoto was the one that I was most familiar with. I'd sold on iStockPhoto. It had been started by this guy named Bitters. That was his handle. It was a tattooed Canadian photographer, really into the idea of crowdsourcing and equalizing the world through the power of the internet. And their early ad campaigns were always like, screw those big guys. Anyhow, then they got bought by one of the big guys, Getty Images, which I think I've spoken to him since. I don't know if he was really happy with that in retrospect. But anyhow, so iStockPhoto, by the time we started, was owned by this billion-dollar company, and we were just terrified of them. We used to watch them very closely. About a year and a bit in, we'd been slowly building towards this music marketplace. One day they announced, hey, we're launching our stock music library. We totally freaked out, and inside of 4 weeks we got ours out, totally hacked it and sort of smacked it together. It was really poorly built, but we got it out. It turns out it took them another 18 months to actually deliver on their promise, and it was kind of an interesting lesson that incumbents, I think it's important to be wary of them, especially when there's market dynamics playing to them. So if we had launched a stock photo marketplace going up against another stock photo marketplace, I think that's quite dangerous. But in the broader scheme of things, you have to remember the bigger a company gets, the slower it gets, the harder it is to do things, the more things they're worrying about. And I've experienced that now as we've gotten bigger, so there's 200-something staff. It's quite different to when we were little, and it's not the things I had imagined. So for example, these days we need to do a really good job of our finances, right? Because we're a big company. We launch a new product. That product needs to have a lot of attention to detail about its financial system, sometimes way more than a brand new startup would. So when we launched Actiden way back, we had a pretty shonky finance system. We spent some time on it, but not that much time. We're really concerned about product fit, getting it out, marketing. When you get bigger, you kind of need to cross T's, dot I's. You can't take shortcuts. Your brand is out there. You've got your reputation. And I think as a small new startup, it's important not to, you need to be careful with big companies, but at the same time, don't worry about them too much.
Yeah, I agree. I'll add to that question. What's your relationship with WordPress? Because I imagine you're a huge driver of business to WordPress. Do they see it that way? Do they understand that? Are they?
Yeah, look, we've had our differences on licensing. WordPress is an open source project, as many of you know. They use GPL licensing. When we first started selling WordPress themes, I didn't even know what GPL was, so we didn't have it. And very early on, I think that put them a little offside. They were like, hey, you need to introduce this. Over time, we've worked hard to get a better relationship with the WordPress community. And I think that's been paying off. But it's a bit of a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
Though at times it's at its strengths, mostly around this licensing thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Open source is usually a very passionate sort of area, and understandably, one of the reasons WordPress has succeeded is that license. So.
Yeah. So we're going to go with the last question here, and I think it's a good one. It's about what's the number one quality of web developers you see contributing to their success on the marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because businesses have been built around just selling
Yes.
mainly on your marketplace, right?
Yeah. So the top author has sold $4 million of one WordPress theme, which is kind of mind-boggling. So yeah, you can do pretty well selling stuff. I think actually it's entrepreneurialism. I don't think I can spell that word, but I can vaguely say it. I think the best web developers see angles. So I mentioned before the most successful Flash guy early on was the one who suddenly realized, hey, there's a market in this kind of XML site template. I think the most successful ones are the ones who have both the design development skill, but also who can see the angles and get products that fit that angle. So on Theme Forest, there was our top themer early on worked out. People loved sliders and 3-column templates, and there was a certain look that they all went for, and he managed to put it out to market before anyone else did, and it just took off.
Yeah, great. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please thank Collis.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Hey.
Cheers.
Thank you.